The forest is darker than ink, its silence broken only by the scrape of a pestle against wood. A crooked hut looms in the shadows, perched not on stone, but on a pair of massive, creaking chicken legs. Its windows glow faintly red, like eyes in the underbrush. Around it, a fence of human skulls glistens, their empty sockets catching the moonlight. Inside waits a figure with iron teeth, her breath hot with smoke and ash. Baba Yaga, the witch every child in Eastern Europe learned to fear. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop it in the comments. If you're into this kind of deep dive, tap like and subscribe. This tale matters because it is more than a bedtime story. Baba Yaga is not just a witch. She is one of the oldest folkloric figures in Europe, perhaps the oldest female monster still alive in storytelling. And tonight, we're going to follow her footsteps back, not just centuries, but millennia. In the familiar version, a child approaches her strange hut. The hut spins when commanded. Hut, hut, turn your back to the forest and your front to me. The door groans open. Inside, soot-black walls, a cauldron simmering, and the witch herself waiting. She may test the child, demanding impossible chores, feeding them scraps while her oven heats. If they fail, she feasts. If they succeed, she may strangely reward them with gifts, advice, or freedom. In Russia, it is Vasilisa the Beautiful who meets her, clutching a magical doll that helps her sort grains of wheat from dirt. In Poland, she lures children toward her oven, echoing the German witch of Hansel and Gretel. In Ukraine, she guards cosmic gates, appearing less as a predator than a gatekeeper of hidden knowledge. Notice how she isn't only evil. Sometimes she is cruel, sometimes helpful, sometimes both in the same tale. And this duality is key. It's why she endures. But here's the shock. The first written description of Baba Yaga is surprisingly recent. Russian historian Nikolai Karamzin mentions her in his History of the Russian State in the year 1818. Later, folklorist Alexander Afanasyev preserved multiple Baba Yaga stories in his Russian fairy tales between 1855 and 1863. That's just 2 centuries ago on paper. Yet when linguists trace her name, they find something older. The word Baba means grandmother or old woman across Slavic tongues. But Yaga, is darker. It may come from a Proto-Slavic root for disease, horror, or fury. If that's true, then Baba Yaga could echo Iron Age concepts of death and plague long before Moscow even existed. And archaeologists have noticed something stranger still. In Bronze Age steppe burials around 1200 BCE, grave goods include miniature huts, raised on stilts and mortars with pestles. These are 3,200 years old. Could they be the deep memory behind the hut with chicken legs and the witch who flies in a mortar? That's the possibility we're following tonight. Picture it. A child standing before the skull-lit hut, the smell of damp birch smoke in the air. The forest floor soft with moss. The chicken legs creak and shuffle, turning toward the visitor. The pestle scrapes again. A sound like bone on bone. The witch peers out, her iron teeth glinting. The child has one chance fail her tasks, and the oven door will open, succeed, and maybe, just maybe, she will point the way to survival. But how did this figure travel across centuries? From whispered firelight tales to printed collections. Who shaped her, softened her, censored her, and where exactly did she come from before Karamzin wrote her down? That's where we go next. Imagine sitting by a peasant hearth in the early 19th century. Birch logs crackle, shadows ripple across clay walls, and a grandmother begins to whisper. Her voice carries the old names, the old warnings. Baba Yaga. A child stiffens, for the hut on chicken legs is not just a fairy tale. It's a living rumor, in villages from the Carpathians to the Urals. But it is only when intellectuals begin to write these whispers down that Baba Yaga steps from the oral into the literary record. Her first known appearance on paper is in Nikolai Karamzin's History of the Russian State. Published in Moscow in 1818, Karamzin was not a folklorist. He was a historian weaving the Slavic past into a coherent national story. Yet even he could not avoid the figure of the forest witch. This is crucial. Baba Yaga was already too culturally embedded to ignore. By the time she entered print, she had centuries of breath behind her. Then came the true chronicler, Alexander Afanasyev. Between 1855 and 1863, Afanasyev compiled his monumental Narodnie Ruski Skazki, Russian fairy tales. He was sometimes called the Russian Grimm, and like Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, he saw folklore as the DNA of a nation. In his volumes, Baba Yaga appears again and again, sometimes threatening, sometimes guiding, always liminal. Through Afanasyev, the chicken-legged hut and the skull fence became canonical. His collection cemented her as one of the great witches of world folklore. But folklore rarely sits still. In the 19th century, editors often reshaped oral material for moral or political purposes. Ukrainian folklorist Mikhailo Dragomanov, in the 1870s, recorded a variant where Baba Yaga serves as the gatekeeper to the sun's sister, a cosmic role less about devouring children than about regulating divine order. Polish collector Oskar Kolberg in the 1880s published a tale where Baba Yaga lures children into an oven, which immediately evokes the Grimm's Hansel and Gretel. Was this influence moving east to west or west to east? Folklorists still debate the direction of transmission, and consider Slovakia, where the Jezi Baba appears so close in name and nature that the link is undeniable. Cannibal witch, crone in the woods, tester of girls' manners, the spread is wide, but the bones of the story stay intact. This resilience matters. Oral tales mutated across languages, but Baba Yaga's strange house, her oven, her hunger, these endured. Now, transmission wasn't only about collectors. Politics reshaped her too. By the 1930s, under Soviet rule, folklore was being edited for children's books. The Baba Yaga of Afanasyev, grisly, ambiguous, was softened. In Soviet storybooks, she became comic, even maternal. Later, in the cartoons of Soyuz Multfilm in the 1950s through 70s, her fence of skulls vanished. The cannibalism disappeared. The witch, who once terrified, now played slapstick jokes. This change reveals something about power and memory. When a figure as ancient as Baba Yaga is stripped of her teeth, it is not just censorship, it is cultural surgery. Scholars like Julie Hellman, writing in 1991, have shown how Soviet cultural policy deliberately blunted folklore's darker edges, turning death goddesses into grandmothers, chaos into comedy. But here's where it gets strange. Even when censored, Baba Yaga never fully vanishes. The hut still turns. The mortar still flies. The skulls, erased on paper, remain vivid in memory. Oral tradition keeps her sharp, where books soften her. Which leaves us with a question. How far back does this figure really go? If Karamzin gave her to history, and Afanasyev gave her to print, who or what gave her to the Slavs before writing existed? That trail leads us into classifications, motifs, and the mathematics of time. And the numbers may shock you. Step into a library of shadows, row upon row of folktale types, numbered, indexed, cross-referenced like fossils in a cabinet. Every story, pinned by scholars to a lineage. Baba Yaga is not immune to this taxonomy. She falls squarely into the great tale types that have traveled the world. The Arne Thompson Uther system, updated in 2004 by Hans-Jörg Uther, identifies her with ATU 313, the magic flight. In these stories, a heroine flees from a pursuing witch or monster, casting magical objects behind her combs that become forests, towels that become rivers. In Slavic versions, the witch is Baba Yaga. She chases. She also belongs to ATU 480, the kind and the unkind girls. Here, two sisters or two maidens are tested by a supernatural old woman. The polite one receives gifts, the rude one, punishment. Baba Yaga, with her iron teeth and impossible chores, embodies this role perfectly. In this sense, she is less a cannibal than a judge. She tests manners, respect, humility, fail, and you roast. Pass. And you live with treasure in your hands. Vladimir Prop, in his Morphology of the Folktale of 1946, placed Baba Yaga as a threshold figure, sometimes a villain, sometimes a donor. In Prop's structural code, she can be both obstacle and helper, the figure who decides whether the hero may continue. Thompson's Motif Index of Folk Literature offers another layer. D672, The Witch in a Hut. Date 114.2. 1. The Hut on Chicken Legs. Fate 113. The Cannibal Witch. These are not arbitrary. They are coordinates on folklore's map, and Baba Yaga occupies them all. Now the numbers. From the earliest written reference in 1818, Baba Yaga is about 207 years old in text as of 2025. That is young compared to the Grimm's fairy tales, which appeared in 1812. But if we chase the archaeology, the picture deepens. Bronze Age burials on the Eurasian steppe around 1200 BCE contain mortars and pestles placed deliberately in graves. Some even feature miniature wooden huts raised on posts, resembling later Slavic burial structures. If those are precursors, then the Baba Yaga complex is not 2 centuries old, it is 3,200. Linguistics supports the possibility. Baba is straightforward, old woman, grandmother, but Yaga is contested. Etymologists like Rick Dirksen suggest it comes from Proto-Slavic genza, meaning horror, fury, or disease. Others, like Vasma in 1953, argue it might echo archaic Indo-European roots for sickness or dread. If so, Baba Yaga could originally mean something closer to granny horror, a personification of plague and death. Why would mortars and pestles appear in graves? Some anthropologists, like David Anthony in 2007, suggest they were symbols of transformation, tools for grinding grain, yes, but also tools for crossing thresholds, seed to flower, body to spirit. The hut on posts could be a memory of raised burial chambers, chicken legs, stylized from wooden stilts. Steppe nomads may have used these structures as liminal houses for the dead. Over centuries, memory blurred into story. A raised hut became a walking hut. A pestle and mortar became a flying vehicle. A funeral guardian became a witch. The math is stark. From Karamzin's pen, 200 years. From Afanasiev's tales, 160 years. But from Bronze Age archaeology, 3,200. That's the gap. That's the secret. And it is here that Baba Yaga stops being just a fairy tale witch and becomes a relic of deep Eurasian religion. But what if she isn't unique? What if other cultures also dreamed of crones in huts, of bone fences and iron teeth? That's the next layer. Finding her echoes beyond the Slavs. Across the Indo-European world and beyond, picture a web of firelight tales stretched across continents. A child in Russia hears of Baba Yaga's chicken-legged hut. In another land, another century, a child hears of a different crone, yet the details rhyme. These echoes matter. They suggest Baba Yaga is not an isolated monster, but part of a global chorus of witches, death goddesses, and threshold keepers. Start close to home. In Poland, the 19th century folklorist Oskar Kolberg recorded Baba Yaga stories that look almost identical to the Russian form. She lures children to her oven. The resemblance to Hansel and Gretel collected by the brothers Grimm in 1812 is uncanny. Did the Grimms borrow from Slavic neighbors, or were both drawing from a pan-European reservoir of child-eating witch motifs? Jack Zipes, writing in 2015, suggests cross-pollination was inevitable. Borderlands of Germany and Poland traded both goods and tales. Shift south to Slovakia. There, the Jezibaba reigns. Her name, a variant of Yaga, shows how deeply rooted the figure is across Slavic tongues. She, too, is a cannibal crone, dwelling in dark huts, demanding tasks, threatening children. The motif is almost identical, yet slightly altered proof that oral tradition reshaped but did not erase the bones of the story. Travel east, into Ukraine. There, in Dragomanov's 1870s collection, Baba Yaga is no longer merely a forest witch. She becomes the gatekeeper to the sun's sister, a cosmic custodian. Here we glimpse the mythic scale. She is not only a devourer of children, but a regulator of celestial passage. The motif expands from oven to cosmos, from forest hut to cosmic threshold. Now, step outside the Slavic world. The parallels are startling. In Greek myth, Hecate stands at crossroads, accompanied by hounds, linked with death and witchcraft. She, too, is a liminal goddess, both feared and invoked. In India, the goddess Kali wears a necklace of skulls, her tongue dripping blood. Like Baba Yaga, she terrifies yet initiates. In Indo-Iranian tradition, demons with bone-crushing teeth guard the afterlife echoes of Baba Yaga's iron grin. And in northern Europe, the Norse giantess Angrboda, mother of monsters, lives at the edge of the ironwood forest. She births terror, watches thresholds, and mirrors the role of the dangerous, ancient crone. But even farther west, consider the witch of Hansel and Gretel. She owns a house not of chicken legs, but of gingerbread. She fattens children. She heats her oven. She plans to devour. The Grimm version may be German, but the DNA is shared. Scholars like Marina Warner, 2002, suggest that famine memory is key. In hungry centuries, stories about child-devouring witches encoded communal trauma. So what do these echoes tell us? That Baba Yaga is not only Russian, not only Slavic. She is part of an Indo-European memory of female figures who sit at the edge of life and death, testing, devouring, sometimes guiding. Whether you call her Jezibaba, Kali, Hecate, or Angroda, the pattern repeats: old, dangerous, necessary. But here's the question. What do her symbols mean? Why a mortar and pestle? Why chicken legs? Why skulls on a fence? To answer, we must decode her as ritual text, as a fossil of ancient religion, rather than just a bedtime monster. Step into Baba Yaga's hut. The air is thick with birch smoke and resin. The walls are blackened by soot. Her fence of skulls gleams faintly, each socket a reminder that you stand at the border of the living and the dead. But every object here carries meaning. To understand Baba Yaga is to read these objects as symbols, ritual fossils, not just props. Start with the hut on chicken legs. At first it seems absurd, comical. Yet anthropologist Linda Ivanitz argued in 1989 that these legs may echo ancient Slavic burial huts raised on stilts. Archaeological finds from the Bronze Age steppe show miniature houses on posts, likely serving as spirit dwellings for the dead. In folklore, those stilts morphed into chicken legs, animated, uncanny. Thus, the hut is not random. It is a mobile tomb, a liminal threshold between this world and the other. Next, the mortar and pestle. In daily life, they are domestic tools for grinding grain, but in Baba Yaga's hands, they become a vehicle. She sits inside the mortar, steers with the pestle, sweeping her tracks with a broom. Scholar Marina Warner, in 2002, suggested this is both absurd and profound, a symbol of transformation. Just as seed becomes flower, the soul passes from life to death. The pestle as rudder, the mortar as vessel, Baba Yaga as psychopomp, guiding across thresholds. Her iron teeth are another sign. Teeth of metal suggest ordeal, violence, and unyielding hunger. Mirza Eliade, writing in 1954, noted parallels in Indo-Iranian myth, where bone-crusher demons devour the dead. Baba Yaga's teeth place her in that lineage. A devourer of flesh, a crusher of bones, a reminder that death is merciless. Then the skull fence. Each head is a boundary marker. Indo-European necropolises often used skulls or bones as territorial signs, symbols of land claimed by the dead. In Baba Yaga's tales, the skull fence is a clear line. Cross it, and you step out of the world of the living. Fail her tasks, and you join the fence. Pass, and you leave with a lighted skull to guide your way. As in the tale of Vasilisa, the skull becomes both threat and gift. Even her role as tester of chores, sorting seeds, cleaning huts, weaving cloth carries ritual depth. These are not only household tasks, they are initiatory trials. To pass them is to prove readiness for adulthood, marriage, or survival. Fail, and you fall back into childhood, symbolically consumed by the witch. Prop, in 1946, argued that Baba Yaga embodies the initiation archetype. She destroys the unworthy and advances the prepared. Her clothing too whispers meaning. Ragged sarafans, kerchiefs, bast shoes smeared with soot, signs of poverty, of the margins. She is not a palace witch, but a forest one. The smells around her hut, damp earth, smoke, stew, carry echoes of famine, death, and burial pyres. Even her commands, hut, turn your back to the forest, your front to me, are ritual formulas. The hut obeys because it is alive, because it is a gate. Step back, and all these symbols align. Hut, mortar, pestle, skulls, teeth. Together, they point to Baba Yaga as more than a cannibal. She is guardian of thresholds, presider over rites of passage, embodiment of death's inevitability. She terrifies because she embodies the one transition no one escapes. But if her symbols speak this loudly, why have so many readers misunderstood her? Why is she so often reduced to a cartoon witch or a simple villain? The answer lies in debate, distortion, and myth-making. And that's where we go next. Picture two scholars at a conference table. Voices rising. One insists Baba Yaga is a death goddess in disguise. The other calls her nothing more than a chaotic cannibal. This is the battlefield of interpretation. And for 2 centuries, it has raged. Start with Vladimir Prop. In his Morphology of the Folktale in 1946, he saw Baba Yaga as a functional character, an archetype of initiation. She wasn't just a witch. She was the threshold guardian who tested heroes, separating the unready from the destined. In this view, her cruelty is ritual, her oven, a symbolic womb or tomb. But Marina Warner, writing in 2002, was less generous. She read Baba Yaga as a chaotic monster, an embodiment of hunger and death without order. For Warner, she's not a priestess of initiation, she's the nightmare at the edge of the forest. Then there's Carlo Ginzburg. In 1989, he advanced a provocative theory. Baba Yaga might be a survival, of ancient Eurasian ecstatic cults, female shamans who bridged the world of the living and the dead. According to Ginsberg, her mortar and pestle are shamanic flight instruments, her hut a spirit lodge, her cannibalism a memory of ritual sacrifice. Some anthropologists embraced this. Others dismissed it as overreach. Meanwhile, nationalist readings muddy the waters. In the 19th century, as Slavic nations sought cultural roots, Baba Yaga was claimed as uniquely Russian, or uniquely Ukrainian, or uniquely Polish. Each claimed her as national heritage. But the evidence, linguistic, folkloric, archaeological, suggests she predates nations altogether. She belongs to Proto-Slavic memory at least, and perhaps Indo-European myth at large. To reduce her to one country is to amputate her past. Censorship adds another layer of distortion. Soviet editors in the 1930s, faced with her skull fence and iron teeth, blunted her into a comic grandmother. By the 1950s, in Soyuz Multfilm cartoons, she had lost her bloodlust entirely. A new generation met her not as death's guardian, but as a bumbling forest aunt. That image still lingers today, even as horror films and video games resurrect her darker side. And then there is the Western misreading. Hollywood, when it touches Baba Yaga, often folds her into the generic witch mold. John Wick famously nicknames its assassin hero Baba Yaga, though the films clearly mean boogeyman, not forest crone. Marvel Comics, back in 1965, used Baba Yaga as a villainous sorceress in Avengers. Andrzej Sapkowski's Witcher novels recast her as a triad of forest crones. Each is inspired, but each simplifies. Common misconceptions abound, that she is purely evil. In truth, she is often a donor figure, helping those who pass her tests, that she is Germanic in origin. While parallels exist, her roots are deeply Slavic, that she has a single true meaning. In reality, she is layered death, initiation, chaos, wisdom, all in one. The ethical flag is this: don't flatten Baba Yaga. Don't turn her into a Halloween witch, nor into a single national mascot. She is too old, too complex, too contradictory. So, if scholars argue, if nations claim, if editors distort, what remains? What is the essence that makes Baba Yaga endure across centuries and censors? That's the thread we'll pull next. The forest is quiet again. The chicken legs creak, shifting the hut as though it senses your approach. And here's the truth. No matter how many centuries pass, Baba Yaga never leaves the forest. She is still here, alive in imagination, alive in culture. The question is, why? One reason is psychological. Every society needs a figure who embodies the fear of death, chaos, and hunger. For Slavic peasants who lived on the knife's edge of famine, Baba Yaga was famine itself. Her ovens smoked with the scent of roasting flesh. Her fence of skulls reminded villagers of the mass graves from winters gone wrong. She was horror made flesh, but horror that could be bargained with. If you were polite, industrious, and brave, you might leave her hut alive. She taught survival by embodying death. Another reason is narrative. Baba Yaga is flexible. In Prop's model, she is both villain and donor. She devours, but she also rewards. This duality gives storytellers freedom. Need a monster? She waits in her hut. Need a guide? She lights the path with a skull lantern. Few characters in world folklore carry that range. Symbolically, she remains powerful because her imagery is unforgettable. The hut that turns, the mortar that flies, the iron teeth, the skull fence. Each is cinematic, concrete, impossible to forget. That imagery has migrated into new media effortlessly. In Andrzej Sapkowski's Witcher series, she inspires the Ladies of the Wood. In Marvel Comics, she appears as a supernatural foe. In John Wick, she becomes the nickname for an unstoppable assassin. Even when distorted, the name carries weight. You hear Baba Yaga, and you know fear is coming. But perhaps the deepest reason she endures is cultural memory. If the Bronze Age parallels are true, if mortars, pestles, and raised huts were once ritual tools of the dead, then Baba Yaga is not merely a fairy tale. She is the survival of an ancient death cult, a guardian of liminal passage older than nations, older than alphabets. That would make her one of the longest-lived mythic figures in Europe, 3,200 years and counting. And yet, she changes. Soviet editors turned her comic. Modern video games make her horrific again. Children's cartoons soften her. Horror films sharpen her teeth. She survives because she adapts. She is not fossilized. She is alive, shifting, just as her hut turns on its legs. So, when you hear the scrape of a pestle in the night, when you see smoke rising from the tree line, you are brushing against the oldest fears of humanity. Hunger, death, initiation, the price of passage. Baba Yaga is not gone. She is never gone. She waits where the forest meets the grave. And here's the unsettling twist. In many tales, Baba Yaga asks no fee, she simply tests, which means the terror lies not in her, but in us. She reflects what we bring into her hut. If we come prepared, we leave changed. If not, we feed her oven. We've only scratched the surface. The next case is even stranger. The will-o'-the-wisp has haunted marshes and crossroads for over 2,000 years, luring travelers to their deaths. Subscribe before it drops, because Baba Yaga may guard the threshold. But the will-o'-the-wisp lights the path straight into the dark.